Hello, this is a video for Art History 2. This is about the Module 1, which covers a work of the Renaissance. The work of the Renaissance is characterized by its high quality and incredible craftsmanship that we see in the artist that kind of sets a bar for all art to come afterwards. Reading from chapter 16, it says, looking back at the artists of the 15th century, the artist and art historian Giorgio Vasari wrote in 1550, truly great was the advancement conferred on the arts of architecture, painting, and sculpture by those excellent masters. From Vasari's perspective, the earlier generation had provided artists the groundwork that enabled 16th century artists to surpass the age of the ancients. And what he's talking about is the incredible craftsmanship and quality of 15th and 16th century artists. Where this comes from is a continuation of skills that were built upon in the 13th, 14th century during the Gothic era and the Middle Ages, specifically the artists that worked on Gothic cathedrals. So there were various guilds and skills that were built up by masters. The way that artists trained in this time period was through a master and apprenticeship model. And as masters would develop skills and they would work for the church to beautify the church, to create sculptures, create doors, create the architecture and the paintings and the items that were found within the church, there was work available and there was money available. And with that came skill that was passed along from ages down from a master to an apprentice. And with each subsequent generation, it got a little better, a little better, a little better, to the point where you're in the late 14th, early 15th century, the artists start to break away. At the same time, you have great patrons like the Medici family and the Scrovegni family who are spending money for the arts. They're spending money on great monuments, they're spending money for cathedrals, and they're spending money for their own collection, sculpture gardens and summer homes and big palaces that are in the Italian countryside where they want to have sculptures. And what type of sculptures do they want? Well, they want sculptures that look like the old sculptures that are from ancient Rome and ancient Greece. At the same time, you also have a new development in philosophy, a rebirth, if you will, of older traditions, older writings. Some of the writers and thinkers of this time period are starting to look back in time and kind of use some of the writings from ancient Greece. So you have this like perfect mix of skills built up through the church, of money from the patrons, and a theory or a philosophy about what art should look like, and you put all that together, and that's where the Renaissance comes from. And that's what you're going to read about in the 14th, 15th, and 16th chapter of Jenson's Art History. I'm going to share my screen just a second, and we're going to look at a couple different works of art here. The first one we're looking at is the work of Donatello. So Donatello here, make myself a little bigger here. Donatello is often considered the first Renaissance artist. Now, of course, there's many artists before him who are a precursor to the Renaissance. I don't even know if the book even says this, but it's a common consensus in the art history world, or at least one position, and a position that I would take, that Donatello is kind of the beginning of the Renaissance. Now, you're going to read about Jan van Eyck, and you've probably read about Giotto, or he may be referenced in this text. But those are precursors to the Renaissance. And Donatello is the point where the Renaissance kind of really kind of takes hold. And what's unique about Donatello is that he's the artist who really breaks free from the old Gothic tradition. Now, he was trained in the Gothic tradition, trained as a master artist to create the entry doors of Gothic cathedrals. And there's some examples of these type of doors. So he was very skilled in working with metal and how to do casting, bronze casting specifically, but also how to carve stone and carve wood. Here you see an early work of Donatello. It's a transitional piece. It's a piece where Donatello is demonstrating some of the old Gothic tendencies, which is a formal sculpture that is attached to the church, framed in the church. This is St. George's Tabernacle, or the San Michael in Florence. It's a marble. It's the height of 6'10" relief. And in the book, there's a comparison with this of Saint Mark, which is another Donatello sculpture. And if you go forward in the book a little bit, there's a later work of Mary Magdalene that comes later that's a freestanding sculpture. And you'll see the drastic difference in how Donatello changes the style, incorporates greater use of emotionalism and kind of a pathos or a kind of plea to emotion. And the other thing you will see is the references to classical Greek sculpture. You'll see kind of a contradictory or a contrapposto stance, or a more natural stance in the character. You also see greater just skill and attention to detail. The next piece we want to look at is a piece by Titian, and this is going to be in Venice. This is the Assumption of Mary. And in this piece, we see Mary ascending to heaven. So we see kind of a three-sectional piece. In the bottom, we have the apostles. We have Peter the apostle. He's always denoted with his key that's attached to the side. Excuse me. We have Mary, mother of Jesus, rising to the heavens. We'll see that she's on this cloud. And then at the top, of course, we have God. Now, in the Renaissance paintings, you'll see a hierarchy of structure: earth, transitional realm, and then heaven above. And you can tell who's the most important by who's on top, and then who's second, and who is third here, right? You can also tell by size relationships often. The central figure or the largest figure is the most important. This painting references many things that are uniquely Venetian, namely the golden dome in the background, which is a reference to St. Mark's Basilica, which is in Venice, and Mary, which is the patron saint of Venice, and the general golden color. Gold is often related to Venice because there's a lot of golden buildings and golden structures within the city of Venice. And this one is in one of the large churches in the center of Venice. Venice is this town that's on the Adriatic. It's a small town, but it's a kind of cultural site that has many of the great artworks, especially found in the Renaissance and the Baroque era. The last piece that we'll look at is one of the most famous pieces from the Renaissance, which is the sculpture of David. This particular piece, I think, is 13.5 feet tall. It's actually much taller when you add the stand that's at the bottom. Now, Michelangelo was a true a prodigy. He was, kind of from a very young age put into an art school or an apprenticeship model, and then also lived with the Medici family and had all the right connections to learn and to study art. He lived a life that was all about art, all the time, every time. So he was constantly studying art or making art or talking about art or thinking about art. He was kind of a crazy character that had a philosophy that the way to get closer to God was to work constantly on the art and to find perfection in the art. And so that's one reason why when you look at some of these sculptures and works from this time period, you can tell that the artist put an incredible amount of time. I mean, it is amazing that one person can carve by hand these huge, gigantic sculptures out of stone and have them so high quality in terms of craftsmanship. One thing that you'll note about Michelangelo's work is, number one, it's very large. Like, these pieces are greater than life size. And the second thing is that it's very much influenced by ancient Greek art. So if you look at old pieces of Greek art, you'll see a comparison where it was obvious that Michelangelo was looking at the ancient Greeks for inspiration. The last thing is that the work of Michelangelo very much influences many artists to come. So when you look at mannerism or the work of, say, Bernini or the great works from the Baroque period, they're all aware of Michelangelo and taking after that particular style. So one of the great kind of time periods in art history is the Renaissance, because it kind of changed the scope and style of art and influenced many artists to come and set the bar for quality in artwork. All artists are aware of it, and if you've seen the work in life, it does kind of give you a kind of goal to aim for, so to speak, in terms of size, scope, and quality. So you're going to read about these artists and some of the lesser known artists in the Renaissance in chapter 14, chapter 15, chapter 16. It will start off by talking about some of the precursors like Jan van Eyck, then go to Donatello. Then it will talk about the kind of main artists that you know about, Leonardo, Raphael, and Michelangelo, and then move on to some of the northern Renaissance and the high Renaissance, Michelangelo and Titian, who's primarily working in Venice. For this class, you're going to want to read the chapters, and then there's a couple of quizzes that are attached. At any point, if you see an artist that you're really interested in, you can kind of take note and maybe write about that artist later for the paper or presentation at the end of class. As usual, if you have any questions, feel free to email me at conm@iecc.edu. Thank you and have a good day.